Welcome everyone. My name is Colleen and thank you for joining me for this short tutorial on Camel or Ustrasana. So our Camel is a front of the heart opener, front body opener, which will also mean engaging the back of the body to support that opening. I encourage you to do lots of warm up before you practice your Camel, and then invite you to bring in a blanket and a couple of blocks for this tutorial. And I will give you an overview of the energetics or the movements for the shape, as well as some different variations that you might try to support your body. So for many years, I just did not like camel pose because I always felt it was unsupportive for my low back and it just always hurt after. So we'll share some different tips that have supported me throughout the years to kind of get into a place of more love or enjoyment of this shape. All right. So I usually take a blanket under my knees for a little bit of padding. You may choose to do the same. So when you're thinking of coming into this heart opener, you want to think of keeping your pelvis kind of in a neutral shape. So rather than that cue of tucking your tailbone under, which creates kind of a flattening or a rounding of the lower back here, you want to keep the pelvis neutral. So if you notice when you come into this shape normally on your own, you start to take this path of least resistance where you're kind of bending into the space where your ribs meet your lower spine. That's going to create a strong compression or crunching in your lower back. That's also creating this tilt of the pelvis forward. So one of the ways to get out of that is to think of lifting your front hip bones. So different from, again, that tucking of the tailbone under. Think of lifting the front hip bones, which will be a little bit of engagement there through your low belly. And keep that action. And then from there, think of lifting your ribs up. Obviously, you can't actually lift your ribs away from your lower spine, but think of lengthening and lifting. And then imagine you're going to start to turn the ribs up towards the sky. So sometimes I like to take my hands under my armpits to facilitate that. Lift and tilt, all while keeping this action in the pelvis. So my lower core is engaged. Notice if your breath changes there. And keep that action. And maybe you start to lean back. So that's going to be a strong stretch for the front of the legs, the hip flexors. So if you sit a lot, that might be a little bit tighter and also create that forward tilt. Keep this action, keep this lift. Hug your arm bones in towards your center of the shoulder sockets. Shoulder blades draw together. That's going to create a lot of opening already in the front of the heart space. Lift, open, start to lean back. So hands can stay at your low back. I like to sometimes have them there if I find like my pelvis really wants to tilt forward and create that lift there. When you come out of it, let your head be the last thing to rise. And you can sit back on your heels if that's supportive, or you might come into hands and knees and round your spine. So a couple other things to take into account here are going to be your legs. So you want to engage your legs because they're what is grounding you here. So using that ground to support then the back body as you open the front body. So a few options for that. And here is where you can use a block. One option will be to take the block between the feet or the inner ankles, and you're going to press your shin bones down into the mat or your blanket. Squeeze your block. Create that lift of the front hip bones. The lift of the ribs, start to turn the heart up towards the sky. Then start to lean back, all while pressing down, squeezing in. Your glutes will be engaged. but you want to make sure you're not squeezing the glutes there. And then use that to support the low back. Another option will be to take the block between the inner legs. So whatever width feels supportive for you. In that same action, and toes can be tucked or untucked, that's up to you. You're gonna squeeze as you press down. So keeping that engagement, neutral pelvis, lift of ribs, arm bones in, shoulder blades together. And hands can come to your low back as you lift the front of the heart up. So think of keeping that space in the low back. So you're engaging the back of the heart, you're engaging the glutes and the hamstrings, you're engaging the legs, all to support. And same action when you're coming out. Just take a breath there. And depending on your back, some of us, our skeletons are going to be a little bit different, and our low back already is a little more compressed or shorter. All depends on the vertebrae of your spine. So sometimes when I'm coming into this shape, I like to take my knees a little bit wider. So this still can create that action of imagining you have that block here, and you're going to hug in as you press down, and then create all those actions, the lift of the front of the pelvis, the lift of the ribs, the hugging of the arm bones in and back. All of that action to create the opening in the front of the body. So a few options as well. Thinking of, again, this opening here under your collarbones. If you want to, depending on how your body feels, you might just take a comfortable seat. And again, this opening of the front of the body. So I'm going to take my arm bones back, draw my shoulder blades together and down, and then I can just walk my hands back slightly to lift the ribs and open the front. So this is one option if it doesn't feel supportive for the knees or the low back. You might take this variation. Another thing to think about is our cervical spine or our neck. So the curve of your neck is going to mirror the curve of your lower back. So if you're in this space, it's going to create more of a curve in the lower back. So if you're already feeling a lot of compression in the lower back and it's uncomfortable when you come out of this shape, you might decrease the curve in your cervical spine. So it might even just be this kind of same action of lifting and just slightly taking the chin up. If you find you're taking your head back and you're already finding that it's a little harder to breathe, I can already find here that I'm creating more tension at the front of my neck here because there is no support for the back of my head. And you might already hear that difference in my voice because it's a little bit harder to breathe. If you have a lot of extension in your cervical spine like I do, and you can take your head back to rest it on the back of the shoulders, that's a little bit different because you're not creating that tension at the front. So finding what works for you rather than what you think it needs to look like. So that's one option, a variation, the seated. You might also take blocks here, and you can place them wherever is most supportive depending on the length of your torso in relation to the length of your arms. You can adjust these as you need to. But same action again, finding what works for the legs. Hug the legs in as you press them down. Lift the front of your hip bones, lift your ribs, draw the arm bones in, shoulder blades together. And as you lift and you draw back, keeping all of that action and engagement, you can just let the hands come to rest on your blocks. So up to you. This option here is always a great one. You can still get that opening, the front of the body. And if you're in a place where it feels supportive for you to bring your hands to your feet, again, the goal is not to bring the hands to the feet, and that is not the deepest expression of the shape. So keep that in mind. Everybody's skeleton is different. Honor where you are in that moment rather than trying to reach what you think the shape should look like. Really think of adjusting the shape to fit where you are in that moment. So getting your hands to your feet is something that comes naturally, or it comes to that as you open the front of the body, your hands reach back and they're already touching the feet. Fantastic. That's where you are today. Great, work with that. Yeah. So if you are there, create that action again of pressing down, hugging in, neutral pelvis, lift your ribs, lift your heart, arm bones and shoulder blades together. And as you start to lean back, your hands come to your feet. Again, not the goal. Think of maybe taking your hands so your palms face out and hands to the inner ankles, and press your feet and your hands together so you're creating that activation in your legs again. Use your inhale to come up. Head is the last thing to rise. You can sit back on your heels, or again, create that rounding of the spine. So another option, if you find that this is something that kind of comes out of your shape, when you're trying to open the front of the heart and your shoulders are still rounded forward, you might even take your hands towards your opposite wrists or opposite elbow, or you might even use a strap here. And then you can really work on that engagement. So maybe you're holding your strap here. You can imagine here that my sweatshirt is my strap. So I'm gonna pull on my strap. So imagine I'm pulling my arms apart as I draw the arm bones back, shoulder blades together, and keep all that engagement. Lift the front of the hip bones, ground down through the legs as you lift your heart, lift your ribs, and keep this action so you're strengthening the back of the body as you open the front. And again, release. Pause for a moment. A lot of times we get that rush of energy coming out of this. You're going to notice if you were holding your breath at any point, it just creates more tension. And then take your counter pose. So again, that rounding of the spine. Thank you so much for joining me. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions or if there's any other shapes that you would like tutorials on. Thank you again. Feel free to share this, like this, or subscribe to see more videos just like this. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.